Hello once again and welcome to another video. This one is a bit different and off the beaten path. In the past I'd done opinion videos in addition to my regular review. Now at first it was a way for me to add my personal thoughts about a ball to the regular review, which is just designed to explain and describe the ball reaction without adding much if any personal bias into it. After the first few, my opinion videos became more like comedy skits to get my opinion across without being so technical. But while they were more fun and light and approachable, they also didn't really do much in the way of getting more in-depth or more technical, which is actually more what I'm about. I like digging deep, I like the nuances and the minutiae of ball reaction, the things that seemingly make two similar balls possibly vastly different in terms of use and application, and that's what I want to accomplish here, so we're starting with the wild streak. Now buckle up because this could possibly be confusing or a little daunting if you're newer to bowling or the more technical side of things, but it's always good to start chewing on more information or get the wheels turning in the right direction. Now, as I said in the review, the wild streak is very responsive to physical adjustments or what you make the ball do, and this is the key characteristic of this ball and what makes it different from a ball with more personality like an Idol or something like the new All-Road. In terms of design similarity, technically the wild streak and All-Road are pretty similar balls. They come in almost the same cover prep, one is a solid, the other's a hybrid, but their cores are also very similar, slightly higher RG and minimally stronger differential for the wild streak, but all in all the cores should do very similar things for these balls, and I think they do. They still breeze through the front part of the lane, which should be easy to see versus a ball with a stronger core like the Idol. As the Idol rolls down the lane, it starts revving very early so that when it sees the slightest bit of friction, it's ready to hook. As it begins gaining traction in the buff area of the lane pattern, it gets into the hook phase earlier, so when it hits clean back end, it's onto the roll phase and it's moving. The higher RG of both the wild streak and All-Road delays this quite a bit more. They don't get into a roll or rev nearly as quickly. They're going to be much more dependent on the cover stock for reaction or movement. Now once the cover stock hits friction, that's when the ball begins to slow down and get into the roll phase, so what's happening for the wild streak and All-Road is happening quite a bit further down the lane than it is for a ball like the Idol. This is how you can have two sanded solid balls like the Idol and wild streak be so different. There are also differences in cover stocks. The base formula for the Idol is a stronger and earlier formula than for the wild streak, so while the Idol needs less friction to hook, the wild streak needs a bit more, so in addition to the large differences in the core, this creates an even greater separation from the two ball reactions. What this does though is create a ball reaction that's much less sensitive to early friction and helps move the reaction much closer to the pins. The Idol's great for heavier volumes up front and controlling friction down lane, while the wild streak is good for helping you get length on drier conditions up front but still being able to control the motion down lane as well. While they are similar in how well they control the back ends, they are quite a bit different in how they do it and the applications where both of these are most effective. Take the typical USBC Open Championships team pattern for example, usually medium length, medium to high oil volumes. Now while you could look at both these balls and say they both have solid covers, they both blend wet-dry well, so they should both control the back end of this pattern well, that's solid logic. However, in addition to the differences between the balls, the other big difference is what this pattern creates. With a higher volume up front, it gets the ball down the lane and helps it store energy. That's why you typically don't want faster response balls on this pattern because they hydroplane on the oil and then jerk when they hit friction. Stronger covers like the NRG-based micro tracks on the Idol help to gain traction earlier and thus reduce the friction response down lane. However, the Idol is a very strong ball, and even though it's going to blend the lane better front to back, it's still going to get traction earlier, and when it hits friction, it's still going. So unless you have a very high amount of speed, for the vast majority of people, a ball like the Idol is going to overpower this pattern. So while its lane blending is theoretically applicable, the overall strength makes it just way too strong to be effective. Take instead the wild streak, solid cover, a bit cleaner, but still needs enough friction to move that it by default is very good at controlling it also. However, being that it gets down the lane much easier than the Idol, it needs more of that friction to get it to move. So while you would think that that technically moves it into faster response territory, it's not quite the same as a ball like the Idol Pearl, which is still rolling and revving and wanting to hook earlier, but with the shiny cover making it quicker response. The entire package of the wild streak is slower or really later response, so when it hits that friction, it's not quite ready to move yet like the Idol Pearl. When the Idol Pearl hits the end of that pattern, it's ready to go, so it's going to still move the reaction closer to you instead of the pins, and that makes it quite a bit tougher to control your angles. A little bit left with the idle pearl and it's gone, a little bit right and it doesn't have the cover to make it back. With the Wild Streak, no, it's not rolling sooner, but it is beginning to gain traction a little earlier. This helps it blend the lane better front to back. The core, however, is not revving nearly as quickly, so it allows you to close your angles down side to side because you aren't in need of adding angle to help you with length, which is what makes ball reaction on a pattern like this so tricky sometimes. You want stability up front, but you also want a softer read down lane. And with the Wild Streak, it allows you to use straighter angles for stability, and the cover helps you blend the back end down the lane. When the Wild Streak hits friction down lane, the cover is going to help control it, and without the core beginning to rev up on its own, this naturally blends the end of the lane. The ball encounters friction, it begins to move, and the important thing about this ball is that the direction it goes off the end of the pattern is entirely up to you. If you have a higher rev rate, you'll be able to come up the back of it, have it control the end of the pattern without fighting the earlier revving or motion you'd have out of a stronger core, and get it to quit or go straight through the pocket. For lower rev rates, you can come around the side of it more to help it move because it's naturally going to want to go longer for you anyway. This is the story of the Wild Streak. It's going to help you control your angles and be very precise with what you want it to do down lane. This also comes with a rather dangerous drawback. This ball is very responsive to angle of rotation changes, so with just a small adjustment in my hand position, I can get the length the ball gets to change by a huge margin, so I can control both distance and shape down lane. The issue here is that if you're not very physically consistent, you could end up with some pretty different results in ball reaction from the same spot with the same speed and same rev rate. In my opinion, this ball will be best for the high average tournament crowd. I can only imagine how many of these you'd have seen at the US Open a few weeks ago if it would have been available. This would have solved the biggest ball reaction problem they were having, which is namely length and directional control off the end of the pattern, because it seemed like most of them had one or the other but not both. If it was getting down the lane, it wasn't shaping right, and if it was shaping right, it wasn't getting down the lane. So this should also be very good for the older crowd who grew up playing straighter angles with urethane and used hand position tricks and changes to manipulate the reaction. This ball loves straighter angles, and they won't have to fight it near as much as stronger balls to get it down the lane. They'll be in full control of what's going on with it. For everyone in the middle, straighter bowlers will get along with it better than the higher rev players. For your lower to medium averages, this could actually help the straighter players out because, again, they're not going to have to fight more dominant ball dynamics messing with their angles. For the higher rev and medium to lower average group, I can only imagine that Wild Streak would magnify your physical errors. Like I said in my review, this ball gives you plenty of room left to right, especially when you wind it up, so this is definitely good news for the higher rev, lower average crowd. But on the flip side, lower average crowds usually make mistakes or misses in a variety of ways. It may be your target on one shot, speed on the next, axis tilt after that, then angle of rotation. So there will likely be better balls for you if you fit in this category, if you're interested in a ball that's helping to minimize or mute your mistakes as much as possible. If you're interested in a ball that will give you sharp and direct feedback on what you're doing wrong, I can't think of a better ball to put that on display and help you identify what mistakes you're making. So in summary, very effective tool, very precise tool, not going to hide or cover up your mistakes. This isn't a ball that's going to see much if any action from me on a house shot, but I have a local sports sweeper series, and this will be the first ball in my bag for Nationals next year, so it will still see a fair share of action. Wild Streak releases on Black Friday, November 29th. Thanks for watching.